going to be your all-purpose flour, your white granulated sugar, brown sugar, baking powder, baking soda, ground cinnamon, salt. Those are going to be all the dry ingredients we're going to use today. And as far as all the other ingredients is going to be, we'll need that stick of butter melted. We'll need oil, 2 eggs, vanilla, and milk. And I think we discussed in the last class, if you don't use whole milk, if you use almond milk, that's perfectly fine. We drink almond milk in my house. That's what I'm using today. So, and then we can go ahead and get started when everyone's ready.
Does almond change change any of the consistency? Does it different?
Not too noticeable. It depends on what you're making. For like a standard cake or muffin recipe, it shouldn't change it too much. The thing with whole milk is that content does assist in the texture. But like for a recipe like this, where it's using like less than a cup of milk, it's not going to affect it to the point where you'll notice it, especially if you handle the batter really carefully. Like by not over mixing, you shouldn't see a huge difference.
Okay. Can you substitute applesauce? Someone wants to know if they can substitute applesauce if they don't have eggs or don't want to.
If you don't have eggs, like applesauce can be used somewhat as a binder. I use it in some of my vegan bakes, so you can. It's kind of gonna be, I guess the trick to that is gonna be how much would 2 eggs be in a cup. So I would say that's probably like a little over, probably about half a cup, or maybe a little bit less than a half a cup. So that's the amount that you would use. You're not going to get an exact texture. The texture is not going to be exactly the same as if you had used eggs, but it's doable. It'll be a little bit more gentle, or it'll be very, very light, as opposed to where if you used eggs, it holds together easily. When I say light, I mean like you ever open, like have a cupcake and you break it open and it's kind of falling apart. It shouldn't fall apart. It should work, but you'll notice a difference.
Awesome. All right. So I want to be mindful of the time. We are down to about 45 minutes.
Okay.
So I'm supporting the Chef Tara as well. All right.
All right.
Take it away.
We'll go ahead and get started. First and foremost, we're going to do the crumb topping, which is really, really super simple. It's just, if you've ever had a coffee cake and you have the little cinnamony crumble goodness on top of it, that's what we're making first. We're going to make that and put it to the side, and then we're going to do our batter because it's going to bake with that crumb topping on top of it. So for the crumb topping, you're going to need a 1/3 cup of granulated sugar. Just a leveled cup. That's a leveled 1/3 cup. Also need a leveled 1/3 cup of brown sugar. I'm using light brown sugar. I prefer it to dark brown sugar, but if you have dark brown sugar, that's perfectly fine too. Dump that right in. All right. I'm also going to use 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. That's a leveled cup. Again, that's 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour.
I posted the ingredients in the chat, guys. If you can't keep up with Chef Tara, I posted it for you. Everything she's saying, I posted it. It says crumb topping, and I put the ingredients about what you need.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For that, for the crumb topping, we're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Always a good idea to add a little bit of salt when you're baking something sweet, because it brings out the flavor. You'll notice the difference if you leave it out. It won't be like detrimental, but you will notice the difference. And going to add 1 teaspoon of cinnamon.
Chef Tara, I noticed that when I use the teaspoon with the, I went out and I bought the little spoons that you have there, and I feel like a teaspoon, a regular teaspoon, measured out differently than one of those measuring teaspoons. Is that it's the same measurement, right?
You mean like a teaspoon, like a teaspoon that you eat?
Yeah. Yeah.
Typically, a long time ago, rather, I think it probably was originally about the same, but now there've been a whole lot of changes to how they're how they're making silverware and whatever. So I can't even say that it's always going to be the same. It should be similar. If you use it leveled, it should be almost to the T, but it would have to be leveled. And again, it just depends on who's making that utensil.
Maybe it's because I didn't level it.
Yeah, if you don't level it, then you're definitely gonna get more than what it should be.
Okay.
So as you see here, I'm just using a fork and I'm just combining all of those dry ingredients together. Making sure everything is completely mixed in, making sure there's no like one spot that has only cinnamon or salt or whatever. All right.
Is there a substitution for vanilla?
I don't think there would be a substitution for vanilla. If you leave it out, I don't think it's going to be a huge problem if you leave it out. It will add another level of flavor, but if you don't have it, it'll still be good. So to the crumb topping, I'm going to take that melted butter and I'm just going to pour it all over that. And I'm just going to take that fork. Try to keep the fork kind of dry, whereas you're kind of just incorporating, or else it'll clump to it. If you don't, then that's fine. But I'm just basically combining it. I'm not mixing it. I'm kind of fluffing it until it's all combined. It'll start to look like a crumbly sand. Can you guys see that? Just want to make sure that you're folding it. I remember last week how I showed you how to fold those biscuits. We're doing the same method. We're just folding it to make sure that there's no pockets of just flour at the bottom and that all of it's combined.
Sorry, Chef Tara, can you do a run through of everything you just said to do about the crumb topping?
Sure. So basically, in a bowl, you're gonna get your 1/3 cup of granulated sugar, a 1/3 cup of light brown sugar, 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. Mix that up really good with your fork. Once that's mixed up and combined, then you're going to add that cup of melted butter, that stick of melted butter, and you're just gonna fluff it together with your fork until it starts to look like that. You guys see how it looks really crumbly, but you don't see any pockets of just like flour that hasn't been touched by that butter. So that's what you're looking for. When you have that consistency, then you're just gonna set that to the side. That's what's gonna go on top of your muffins before they bake. And that's it for the crumb topping. And for the crumb topping, if you happen to not be making a full batch or you have some left over because some people like more crumb topping than others, then this can definitely, you can put it in a Ziploc bag and put it in the fridge or in the freezer, and you can use it, you know, weeks or months even later. Okay. And so now we're gonna go ahead and get these muffins put together so that way we have time to bake it. Hopefully we'll have time to even show you what it looks like at the end. I think we're good on time in that sense. So for the I'm gonna grab a cup, sorry.
Is everybody good up till this point? I'm just asking, I'm making sure everybody's good. Everybody's good up until this point for Chef Tara and on. All right.
Everybody good for her to move on? Yes, no, shake your head. Thumbs up.
Everybody good?
Not you, Sydney, because you're not cooking. For the ones that are cooking in the kitchen. What do we do after we put it together?
After you put it together, you mean after we after the crumb topping is done?
Yes.
We're gonna put it to the side and we're gonna start on our muffin batter.
Okay. You heard that, Marcus? You're getting ready to start on your muffin batter. Anybody else have any more questions?
Okay, so like just put all the ingredients together
And
just
mix
like
it
move
with
it
your
to the side.
fork and then put it to the side.
Oh, okay.
Put all the ingredients together, then put all the dry ingredients together, mix it together really good. Put your melted butter in that, mix it really, or rather fluff it together and fold it together really good. It'll look like a really rocky, sandy mixture, and then you'll put it to the side.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so for the muffin batter, so we're gonna start with 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour in another bowl. When I'm adding dry ingredients, or when I'm adding ingredients to a bowl for like muffins or cake or whatever that, whatever I'm making, I like to put the ingredients in the bowl separately, because sometimes, at least I do, I have kids and I have life going on around me and I get distracted. So if I do have to stop, I can come back and say, okay, that's where I left off. Does that make sense? So I have 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, and I'm gonna use a 1.5 cups of light brown sugar. I'm sorry, not 1.5 cups, a 1/2 cup of light brown sugar. Sorry, I lost my place. And I'm gonna add that right to that same bowl.
And for anybody who's following along who doesn't have like a measuring cup or anything, we measured out everything for you. So like the flour, you have 3 cups of flour. So 1/2 of your bag is 1.5 cups. So if you don't have measuring tools, just 1/2 of that bag is 1.5 cups. And then your brown sugar is already measured out for you, so you can just pour it from the bag into the bowl. Thanks, Chef Tara. You can keep going.
Okay. So yeah, so we have 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. We have a 1/2 cup of light brown sugar. I'm gonna add to that 2 teaspoons of baking powder. That would be the portion cup that says BP. Add that. I'm gonna add 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. That's the portion cup that says BS. And we're going to add some cinnamon to that. That's going to be 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon. All right. And to that, we're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of salt.
Can you use other flavoring other than the cinnamon? Could I use like nutmeg?
You can use other flavorings, or you can just, if you're not huge on cinnamon, you can leave it out completely of the batter. I wouldn't suggest replacing it with nutmeg, only because nutmeg is the flavor of nutmeg is a lot more powerful than cinnamon. So if you were to maybe add nutmeg because you like nutmeg, I would not add as much as you would add the cinnamon. And so now I'm just going down, I have my flour, my light brown sugar, my baking powder, my cinnamon, my baking soda, and my salt all added to my bowl. I'm just gonna give that a quick stir with a spoon. If you have a whisk, you can use a whisk, but for this type of muffin, remember last week when I kind of went over how delicate the batter was for those biscuits that we made? So muffins are kind of similar, whereas they're really delicate as far as you don't want to overmix it, because if you do overmix it, it will really activate the gluten in the flour and you'll get kind of a bready or more dense muffin, and we want it to be really light and fluffy. So, but that all happens once the liquid is added. So I'm just mixing my dry ingredients together to make sure it's all incorporated.
Okay. How much baking powder was it again, Chef?
For baking powder, it's going to be 2 teaspoons. For the baking soda, it's 1/4 of a teaspoon.
So it is actually measured already for you in your portion cups.
Now, in another bowl or in a cup or whatever you have on hand, I'm going to add my wet ingredients. I'm going to give those a quick stir, and then I'm going to add my wet ingredients to the dry ingredients. And so I'm using 3/4 of a cup of milk. I'm going to add my 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla to that. I'm going to add 1/3 cup of vegetable oil. And finally, I'm going to add my 2 eggs to that. I always crack my eggs in a different container because you don't want a chance that shells will get caught into it. And more likely than not, if you do crack it in a separate container and you pour out, usually what will happen is those shells will stick to that container 9 times out of 10. So just to be on the safe side, I'm going to crack my eggs in a cup. And I'm using, like my eggs have been sitting out for about an hour. If you haven't and you took them right out of the fridge, that's perfectly fine. But I always suggest using room temperature ingredients when you're baking, unless the recipe specifies that it needs to be cold. All right, so I have in my cup, my milk, my vanilla, my oil, and my 2 eggs. I'm gonna go ahead and just give that a beat, a stir. You wanna make sure that those eggs are broken up and it's all combined. Again, you can use a whisk or you can use a fork, whatever you prefer. All right, I'm gonna add this mixture to my dry ingredients. And I'm just gonna go ahead and lightly stir it until it's just combined, until it's all moistened. Don't wanna overmix this because I want really light and fluffy muffins. So I'm just doing the same thing that we did last week with those biscuits. And I'm mixing maybe a little bit more than I did the biscuits because I want a batter, I don't want dough, but I'm not overmixing. The batter's gonna be a little bit lumpy, and that's perfectly fine. You just wanna make sure you don't have any pockets of dry flour. You want it to be all
The recipe is supposed to be in the chat, guys. If you scroll up, the recipe's in the chat with the amount of ingredients that you need. I think it was 2 eggs, right, Chef?
Yes, 2 large eggs. If you don't have large eggs and you usually buy medium or small, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, if you scroll up, the recipe is actually in the top of the chat. I can repost as well. So I don't with their biscuits looked really, really smooth on top. I don't remember who that was, but remember from what Chef Tara is saying that you're not gonna over mix it. The reason why Chef Tara's biscuits came out looking the way that it did was because she didn't overwork the batter. She wasn't like mixing until it was really, really smooth. And so you're saying, Chef, that the same holds true here, where you don't want to mix it till it's like super, super smooth. You don't want to beat it.
Right. So as far as the biscuits being smooth last week, I think we had an issue where maybe too much liquid might have been added. I think that was more the concern on that, whereas it probably it wasn't as doughy because it was a little bit too liquidy. But yeah, same deal as far as the not over mixing. You want to make sure that you don't have anything that hasn't been completely combined, like you don't want like streaks of oil or streaks of egg or pockets of flour. You want to make sure it's completely combined, but you also want to make sure that you don't overmix. So you'll see a couple lumps, and that's perfectly fine. Once you can see that everything's been perfectly combined and it's a little lumpy, go ahead and you can leave. That's where we want to be. And I'm gonna grab my muffin pan, and I'm using a scoop today, but like an ice cream scoop. But you can use a spoon. You can pour it in, however is more convenient for you. I'm gonna go ahead and line my muffin pans. If you don't have muffin pans and you have like maybe a 13x9 pan, that's perfectly fine. You can bake it all as one, like the original coffee cake is, and you can, do it that way instead of doing muffins.
Yeah.
And
y'all have cupcake, what do you call those things? Cupcake cups?
Cupcake liners.
Cupcake liners. You had cupcake liners along with your groceries. You have 12 of them. So if you have a cupcake tin, you're gonna want to use those liners.
Right. And again, if you don't have a cupcake pan, or if you have the muffin pan, you can use a muffin pan. If you're using a muffin pan and you don't have liners for a muffin pan, those are the larger cupcakes, then you'll want to spray or butter those pans if you don't have a liner. Again, same thing if you're using a pan instead of a cupcake or muffin pan. If you're using like a 13x9, or if you're using loaf pans, you want to make sure that you grease those pans either with like a cooking spray or baking spray or like with butter. All right, and to that, I'm going to go ahead and scoop my batter into my muffin pans. And I'm using, again, an ice cream scoop. The thing with when you're filling up the pans, rather than trying to figure out how much how much you're putting in your scoop or whatever, you want to make sure that each liner is filled up maybe 3/4 of the way, between a halfway up to 3/4. You don't want to go above that; it'll start bubbling over, and you won't have room for your topping. And if you go too low, then they'll overbake likely and not be as yummy. All right, so that's turned out to be just about 1 scoop of that. I always keep scoops in my house because whenever we do muffins or cupcakes, it just makes it easier to get past this part and makes less of a mess, I think.
Hey, Chef, can you put it up to the camera so they can see just how high they're supposed to be going?
Sure.
Got it. Okay.
there. Do you see I'm leaving like a quarter of that
Yeah.
quarter left? Yeah. So I look at the negative space rather than how much I'm putting in. That way I know that they're going to be consistent across the board, or it's more likely to be, if that makes sense. And if you overfill it, you can take a spoon and grab a little bit out of it. You know, they're just cupcakes. They won't be mad at you. They'll still taste good. And all right. These should make just about the amount that we have on here, which is 12. If you have a little bit left over, then maybe they could, it just depends on your pan too.
Somebody wants to know if can they use medium eggs? Will it still work?
Yes, you can definitely use medium eggs. You won't notice the difference. Yeah, so it looks like we've got exactly 12. At least I've got exactly 12 here.
All cupcake recipes are different, obviously, because they're different with what you put in. But the flour, baking soda, baking powder, salt, is that like the basis for a cupcake recipe?
Well, like you said, they're all going to be different depending on the type of cupcake that you're making. But baking powder, I would say, starts. Some recipes will call for even more of a leavener, like we added baking soda and baking powder to this one. Baking powder is basically cream of tartar and baking soda, a combination of both. So in this sense, we added it because this recipe called for something just a little bit lighter. It just depends. But I would say if you're just kind of trying to create a recipe of your own, a good place to start would definitely be baking powder. You know, salt, like I said, whenever you're doing something sweet, you want to add just a little bit of salt. It's going to bring up that flavor level a little bit more.
Got it. Got it.
All right, so I have all of my pans filled at this point. I'm going to go back to my crumb topping, and I'm going to grab a spoon, and I'm just going to start piling some on each one of those. It's going to seem like a lot, like where's this going to go once it bakes, but trust me, this is the goodness. This is the goodness. You don't want to skimp on this. If you must, then you can, but this is what makes it what it is. And you may have some left over. That's perfectly fine. Again, like I said, if you have crumb topping left over, you can put it in the freezer in a Ziploc bag or in the fridge in a Ziploc bag, and you can use it for, you know, something later on. You can try it on another dessert and it should be good. And I'll show you what this looks like when I'm done so you can see just how much I'm covering it. If you have really big lumps.
Good job, Mel.
What was that?
You making a cake?
Am I what?
Not you, Chef Tara, one of the kids. She was acting
sorry.
like it was a cake.
All right. I have a lot of big lumps in here, so I'm just breaking those up a little bit. It's not the end of the day if they go on just as they are, but I want them to break out so I can get, you know, the crunchies to spread around when it starts to bake. All right.
Chef, Marcus says that his is like soup. Did he
The
too much liquid to it?
The batter, you mean?
Yeah. Is it the batter, Marcus? Unmute yourself. Is it your batter that's too your batter's too runny?
Yeah, yes, like it's moving way too much.
I mean, it shouldn't be like a dough. If you're looking for it to be the same consistency as the biscuits, it's going to be, it's not like that. It should be like a batter. Can I see it? Are you able to show it to me? Let me see if I can. If it is too
Mm,
runny, then likely.
like it moves a lot.
Did you put the flour in it?
Let me see.
I already put it in there.
How much flour did you put in it?
Mm, the amount on the ingredient list.
Okay.
Which
So
one are you reading? Are you looking at the ingredients and instructions for the right part?
There's I
it's
went to
1.5 of flour.
it's at the part where it says ingredients for muffins, 1.5 cup.
Oh yeah.
How much liquid did you add to it? How much milk?
How much milk? 3/4.
3/4 of a cup. That looks really, really liquidy. Um,
Add
I,
more flour.
yeah, I would think that because it doesn't look like a cup and a half. I'm wondering, did you use a what kind of measuring cup did you use for it when you were portioning out the flour?
1/4.
1/4. So you did. So if you used 1/4, then you would have done 6 of those. Is that what you did?
I did 3.
Okay, so if your measuring cup says 1/4, then 1/4 you're going to need 4 of those to make 1 cup, and then you're going to need 2 more to make that half. So if you're using a 1/4 measuring cup, you would have needed 6 of those. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you add that, then you'll see it starts to look normal again.
Okay. Thank you.
So if you did 3 of those 1/4 cups, you'll need 3 more. All right. I'm going to give you guys a peek of what this looks like. Let me see. Can't see myself. 1 second. All right. So those are what it looks like. I'm going to pop
Nice.
these in the oven right now. I'll be right back. And I'm going to set a timer. These are going to bake anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how you scooped. And so I'm going to start at 15 minutes. I'm setting a 15-minute timer. When that goes off, I'm going to stick it with the skewer. If it comes out clean, I know it's ready. If it comes out with like some dough, I know it needs a couple minutes. And what I'll do at that time is maybe add 2 minutes, maybe add 3 minutes or what have you.
And their ovens are supposed to be set to
375 degrees.
375. Got it. I thought it was
And my
400.
oven
Okay.
at home is a little bit small. With a smaller oven, it'll tend to heat up a little bit more. So I put my personal oven down maybe 10 degrees or 10 to 15 degrees lower than that. And if you're not sure, if you are comfortable with your oven to know that yours runs a little bit hot or what have you, you can make that adjustment. But the medium is basically 375 degrees.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so questions. For those of you that are still working, if you need Chef Tara's help, go ahead and unmute yourself. Unmute yourself if you have questions, or you can post it in the chat, but I know your hands are probably full. How long did you say they're going to leave it in the oven for? You said start with 15 minutes?
I would start with 15 minutes. So for these cupcake size, I'm going to do 15 to 20 minutes, depending on, your oven. I'll check it at 15 minutes. If it's not ready, I'll add 2 or 3 minutes. If you're baking it in a pan, that's going to change a little bit. So you probably start it at 20 minutes and then check it, so on and so forth. But
Got
15
it.
minutes is a good place to start.
Got it. And then each time that you're checking it, say like you go to check it after 15 minutes, you put in the skewer, you pull it out, it's still a little wet, you leave it for another 5 minutes, you do the skewer again, right? And then pull it out. So that's how you're testing it.
Yes.
Just to make sure that it's cooked. Okay.
At 15 minutes, at 15 minutes, if they have started to kind of look cupcakey, but it's still pulling out dough in the middle, when I stick it with the skewer, I'm going to add 2 or 3 minutes. I wouldn't add 5 minutes right on top of that. Then you don't want to overbake it. When you overbake it, it'll dry out and it won't be as tender. So
got it. And then for those who are not doing cupcakes, maybe they didn't have a cupcake tin, but they're doing like a full, you know, like a full coffee cake. And is the bake time still the same?
it's going to depend on the size of the pan that they're using. 15 minutes is a great place to start. If you are baking it in a pan and you put it in for 15 minutes and you look at it and you can tell it's not, you can tell it's still moving in the middle or that it's not quite where it should be, don't even stick it. Just go ahead and close it. You can add 5 minutes to that. When it starts to look like, okay, the top looks done, but I'm not sure if it's done on the inside, that's when you want to stick it. And if it's coming out wet or if it's coming out with batter on it still, you know, you want to add minutes. Like if you're doing it in the pans, then you can start to maybe increase it and add it like 4 or 5 minutes at a time.
Okay, got it. So how are we doing, everybody? Are we good?
I need help with my batter. It kind of looked like Play-Doh.
Who is, let me see, who is that's talking? Chef Tara, can you see?
It's supposed to look like this.
And Solomon is having the same problem. So
This one, is that Akeelia?
yes.
Tequila.
It looks pretty fine. It looks like you may have overmixed it just a little bit, but the consistency looks like it's good. So if you're confident that
Solomon, that's good. She said you probably overmixed it.
Then what about this?
Ingredients, then you should be fine. Yeah, that's about, it looks like the same consistency as mine. It may have just mixed a little bit more than mine, but it looks good. The consistency doesn't look too runny or too thick.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions? Trying to see everyone.
When you line the cupcake tin, do you put butter in the liners?
No.
You just put the liners in and pour the stuff inside. Okay.
Yeah, just the liners makes it so you don't have to grease your pan. If you're using a pan that's bigger, or if you don't have liners, then yeah, you definitely want to spray or grease your pan.
All right, we're looking good. I'm scanning to see everybody. Yeah, that consistency was good.
Cool.
All right. So we're just waiting for them to bake. Can you put liners into a regular pan? Can you do that, Chef Tara? Have you ever tried that?
I have tried that.
Into the regular pan. Does it fall over?
Yeah, I have done that before, but not for the sake of giving it to anyone. But I mean, it'll bake. What'll happen is, because it doesn't have the structure of the pan, it'll kind of discombobulate. So it may stay in there, but it might turn out to be square or just kind of just. You don't want to do that if you're making cupcakes for someone.
Got it. My sister did it with, she made like bread. No, sorry. She made keto cupcakes, and she only had like she had like a small round pan. So she lined it, you know, all the way around and made it kind of tight so that it kind of held up the sides of the cupcake.
Yeah.
And it held shape a little bit. It did spread out just a little bit, but it held the shape. So if you're using, if you have a small pan, or if you're able to, you know, get something with like high sides where you are able to do that, I say try it and let us know how it comes out. It's still gonna taste really good.
It's still gonna taste good, yeah. And if they're together enough to where they're not spilling over, because this batter is not super runny, it's also a better chance that you'll have a good turnout. You know, as long as they're kind of holding each other's sides up, then I say try it if you don't have a pan and you want to do it in the liners.
Beautiful. All right, how are we doing? How's everybody doing?
You want to just bake it as one coffee cake in that round pan, you can do that too. That's perfectly fine too.
Yep. True.
Just make sure that you
True.
grease it.
Got it. And no wax paper.
For this, so for this, if you're going to bake it in a pan and you want to line it with wax paper, that's perfectly fine. If you're scared that the
Okay.
bottom's going to burn or something like that, just make sure that you still grease it. I still prefer parchment paper, but wax paper is perfectly fine to line the bottom of it. You just don't want to use wax paper when the wax paper itself is going to be exposed in the oven. So if it's covered by batter, you should be fine.
Got it. Okay. Okay. All right. How we doing, everybody? Did everybody get their cupcakes into the oven on 375?
Unmute yourself, guys.
Yes.
I've been on 350 because I have a gas.
That should be fine. So for 350, you might notice it might take a couple minutes longer. That's perfectly fine.
And yes, you want to add the crumbs onto the top of your cupcakes once you've put them into the cupcake liners, into the tin. Gotta download this game.
Marcus, I thought you was baking. You look like you outside.
I was outside. Okay.
Another
I had to go
thing,
get the pan.
recipe that you'll notice, so a lot of recipes that you'll notice for cupcakes, it'll say bake at 350 or maybe a lower temperature than what it's asking for now, because you don't want to burn the top of your cupcake. This recipe is a little different because it has that crumb topping on there. We want that to get super nice and crispy. It's not going to be like burnt or scalded or anything like that, but that's why the temperature on this recipe might be a little bit higher than you would think that you'd see on a cupcake or muffin recipe.
All right, we are looking good. We're looking good. How much time do you have on your timer, Chef?
On my timer, I've got about 5 minutes on my 15-minute timer.
Awesome, awesome. So we are gonna be like just there, which I think is absolutely amazing. Does anyone have any questions for Chef Tara about anything baking while we have a couple of minutes?
If we run over time, it's okay. I let Miss King know that we're baking.
Okay. Yeah, anybody have any questions for Chef Tara about baking? About this recipe, about the biscuits? Any questions for me, even though Chef Chad isn't here, about anything that we've made? Did everybody get their cupcakes into the oven? It looks like everybody did. Akelia, this recipe will be emailed to you. The one. Did anybody try? Did anybody? I think all of you put your cupcakes at the same time as Chef Tara. I forgot to say that you should be. I know Chef Tara putting on to make no. I see. Melodia. Beautiful. How do you know when they're done? Do they just brown? Well, or you were saying like use the skewer, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you want to make sure that they should definitely look higher than they did when you just put them in the oven, like rounder. And then you just want to make sure that they're not moving if you tap it on the top. But the easiest way is just to stick a skewer right in the center and pull it out and see if that skewer is wet or still has batter on it, or if it comes out clean. And if it comes out clean, then you're good to go. It's ready. It's ready. And I should have specified, you know, if you're baking these, you want to make sure, preferably you want to bake them on the middle rack. It's perfectly fine if you did them a little bit lower or a little bit higher because these don't bake for very long. But whenever possible, you usually want to try and bake on the middle rack in your oven. That way the heat gets to it evenly and the bottom doesn't get done before the top, et cetera, et cetera. I'm starting to smell cinnamon, so I know it should be done soon because I smell it like really powerful at the 13-minute mark. So I've got 2 minutes left on my timer where I'm going to check it with a skewer. If you don't have a skewer, you can use a toothpick or you can use a sharp, slim knife and put it in gently in the top and pull it out gently and see if it is clean. So if anyone has any questions about baking, either what we did today or what we did last week, or just anything about baking at all, just let me know.
Looks like we're good, Chef.
Cool.
Are we getting any? Let me check the chat.
No. I got a question. Like, if you trying to bake something like brownies and you want to put something in there, how would you do it? You would put it in a batter?
So if I was making brownies and I wanted to put something in it, you mean like nuts or something, or like chips or something like that? Chocolate chips?
Yes.
So I would make the brownie batter and then I would put that either in at the very last minute, right before I'm putting it in, because the thing with brownie batter is it dries up and it seizes up easily. So I'll put that in at the last minute, or you could even sprinkle it on top and just kind of press onto it to get it in that way.
Okay.
That is my 15-minute timer, so I'm gonna do my check real quick and I'll be right back.
All right. So if you've had your cupcakes in for about the same time as Chef Tara, you are at your 15-minute mark. So go ahead and check on them.
All right, so I checked my muffins and I didn't stick them because I can just tell just by tapping the side that they are risen a lot, but they definitely need a little bit more time. So I'm gonna add 3 minutes to my timer and then I'm going to check it again. But they look good. My kids are gonna be happy. I'm gonna grab a bag for this. So since I have all this topping left over, I'm gonna stick this right in a Ziploc bag and I'm gonna label it with today's date and what it is, and I'm gonna pop it in the freezer because I will use it again.
Is the crumb topping, can you use the crumb topping for other things other than cupcakes?
Absolutely, you can use it to top.
What else could I use it for?
You can use it to put on top of like a pie, or if you wanted to do like an apple crisp or like something quick where you kind of just stew up some fruit. Like if you just put some cinnamon and sugar and some apples and cook it up for a few minutes, put it in a little baking container and top it with the crumb topping, you have like a little apple crisp, and it's really, really super quick, you know, so you can definitely use it for different things.
Yeah. Melidia, how we doing? You dancing? Did you pull them out? Good job. Awesome, awesome. All right, so if you pulled out your cupcakes, show them. It's tell time. So let us see what they look like. Just hold them up to the camera.
Anybody took their cupcakes out? We would like to see them. Mel, Billy. Oh, 2 minutes.
2
Okay.
minutes. 2 minutes.
Chef Tara, are yours out?
Me. What was that?
I said, are yours out?
Nope, not yet. I think we're right on the same page. I've got about 2 minutes left on mine too. And I'm gonna check them. Hopefully they'll be ready and I won't have to set another timer. Yeah, I've got like 25 seconds. So I'm gonna actually go ahead and check it and see where it is. Be right back.
Billy, how's your cupcakes? They're not ready yet? How much time do you have left? 3 minutes? Okay, I can't wait to see it. Blandine, how's it going?
It's in the oven. It's not ready yet.
Okay, Akelia, did you put yours in the oven?
All right, we have cupcakes.
My birthday coming, who gonna mail me a cupcake?
See, so these just look something like that,
Ooh.
right? And I've inserted my skewer and they came out clean, so we should be good to go.
Those look good.
Yeah, nothing on my skewer, so we are good to go. Whew. This vegan life is killing me a little bit, y'all, but my kids are gonna be happy. All right. I'm excited to see you guys' cupcakes.
I was just gonna say, pick up the phone, Mel. Oh, it looks really good.
Really nice. Good.
Did you sprinkle powdered sugar on top? You fancy. Sprinkle powdered sugar. All right, Mel. You got to take a picture and post it in the group me.
Cool. See, I like that. Get creative. Make it your own.
They smell good. Be careful, Mel.
And if you wanted to like kick these up a notch, you could add like a dried cranberries to it. You could add chocolate chips. You know, you can always add to it. You just, again, you don't want to add too much because you don't want to change the texture of it, and you want to do that at the very last minute. But like I said, I always suggest trying it as is first, and then you'll know what it can take, how you can tweak it for next time.
I think that's it. Billy, did you want to show your cupcakes? Anybody else want to show the cupcakes before we get off the call and go join the afternoon PM call? I guess not.
Wait a minute. Wait,
oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I ain't hear you. Solomon.
What the fuck?
wait.
Why are you screaming? Are they ready?
Very nice. Very nice. Good job, guys.
Oi. Oi, wait.
There we go. All right, how did we do?
We
You
did.
didn't put any crumble on top? Billy, you didn't put any crumble on top?
I did, but I guess it like sunk through and like baked in with the batter.
It tastes real good. I put nutmeg in mine too.
It looks like it tastes good. You are eating that up.
We have a thumbs up over here.
Oh
Good.
man.
Awesome.
I'm glad you liked it. It looks
Well,
really
don't
good.
eat all of it before you take pictures and send them, please.
Taste
Make
test.
sure you take
Maybe.
pictures before you eat all of them.
Maybe.
All right. Is everyone good? Can we tell Chef Tara thank you? If you have any additional questions, can y'all just tell Chef Tara thanks?
Unmute yourselves, guys, please.
Thank you, Chef Tara.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Chef
Thank
Tara.
you.
You guys invited me to do this.
Thank
with
you.
today.
Don't eat it. Oh, I need it. Don't touch it yet.
You're welcome.
Don't touch it.
Send pictures.
Don't touch it.
Please post pictures in the
Yes.
group.
Okay.
Yes.
We're
Please
gonna
send
send you
pictures.
pictures.
Awesome. And if you have any questions going forward, you can always contact me at sweettowernovelty@gmail.com.
I already have the coconut oil. I have the olive oil. I have the what's that again?
All right, everyone. Thank you. As always, if you need us, chefculture@gmail.com. Thank you, Chef Tara. Thank you very, very much. If anybody has any questions about anything that we've gone over in the class, we will start to email. We'll start to email over some of these tips and tricks and the recipes for y'all. Thank you, everyone.
This is so hard. Leave it.
It's not ready.
Leave it.
Yes, it's ready.
Fine, I'll leave it.
I think it's not ready. That's why it's like that.
No, it's
All right, so no more questions, right, guys? It's 12:38. All right.